Now, at 71, Don Knotts' daughter has finally broken her silence, and what she revealed about her father's private struggles is far darker than the public ever imagined. For decades, the world adored Don as the bumbling yet lovable Barney Fife on the Andy Griffith Show, but behind the laughter, there was an awful truth carefully hidden from the spotlight. His daughter's heartbreaking confession sheds light on the pain, the pressure, and the haunting reality her father endured away from the cameras. To millions of television viewers, Don Knotts was the embodiment of joy, laughter, and innocent charm. His role as Deputy Barney Fife on the Andy Griffith Show remains one of the most iconic performances in television history. Knotts' jittery voice, nervous mannerisms, and comedic timing made him unforgettable, and audiences adored him as the lovable small-town deputy who always meant well but rarely got things right. He was, in the public eye, a man who seemed to have been born to bring happiness into people's homes. But behind the perfectly timed punchlines and the goofy grin was a man living with an entirely different reality. Don Knotts' daughter, Karen, who is now 71, has opened up about the darker side of her father's life, revealing a story that contrasts sharply with the sunny image the world held of him. Far from the confident and funny character audiences came to love, Don was plagued by insecurities, anxieties, and struggles that shaped not only his career, but also his private relationships. Born in Morgantown, West Virginia in 1924, Knotts grew up in circumstances that were anything but idyllic. His early years were marked by poverty, family tension, and instability. His father, who reportedly struggled with severe mental health issues, often created an unsafe environment for the family. Karen recalls stories of how her father grew up in a household that was haunted by fear, a fear that would stay with him long after he left home. This difficult childhood planted the seeds of the inner turmoil that would shape Don Knotts as both a performer and a person. As Karen explains, comedy wasn't just a talent for her father, it was survival. From a young age, Don learned that making people laugh could diffuse tense situations, distract from conflict, and provide him with a way to escape his own fears. But this ability to entertain came at a cost. While he brought joy to audiences, Don himself was often unable to find it in his own life. He carried a deep well of sadness and anxiety that never fully went away, no matter how successful he became. Karen has spoken about how her father's insecurities often translated into his personal life. Despite being adored on screen, Don was extremely self-conscious about his appearance and rarely believed he was worthy of the fame he achieved. Off-camera, he struggled with nervousness and bouts of depression. The public saw a confident, funny man, but his daughter knew the truth. He was fragile, often doubting himself even in the moments when the world was applauding him the loudest. She also recalls how fame brought its own pressures. The success of the Andy Griffith Show placed Don under constant scrutiny, and while he earned multiple Emmy Awards for his performance, he often worried about whether he could live up to the expectations. Karen describes her father as someone who was perpetually chasing approval, terrified that one day people would see through his act and realize he wasn't as talented as they believed. This duality, the public clown and the private worrier, defined Don Knotts' life. Karen has admitted that it was sometimes heartbreaking to watch the man who could make millions of people laugh come home and wrestle with loneliness and self-doubt. It is this contrast, she says, that most people never understood about her father. The joy he gave the world came from a place of deep personal pain. By peeling back these layers, Karen provides a more complete portrait of Don Knotts. He wasn't just the silly deputy or the bumbling character audiences adored. He was a man carrying the weight of a difficult childhood, a fragile sense of self-worth, and the burden of always having to be funny, even when he didn't feel like laughing at all. And as we'll discover in the following chapters, the awful truth his daughter refers to isn't about scandal or disgrace. It's about the hidden cost of comedy, the sacrifices Don Knotts made in silence, and the emotional toll that being America's funny man took on his heart and soul. When Don Knotts stepped into the role of Barney Fife, the insecure but lovable deputy sheriff of Mayberry, he changed television forever. The Andy Griffith Show became a cultural phenomenon, and Barney quickly stood out as one of its most memorable characters. Knotts' comedic brilliance earned him 5 Emmy Awards during his run, and for many, he became the very heart of the show. Audiences saw him as a natural-born clown, the man who could effortlessly steal a scene with just a nervous glance or a clumsy stumble. But what few realized was how much pressure this fame put on him. Karen Knotts has revealed that while her father was celebrated publicly, privately, he was consumed by fear. He worried constantly about whether he could continue living up to his own reputation. Each award he won only raised the stakes, convincing him that if he didn't keep topping himself, the world would turn its back on him. Karen recalls that her father often felt trapped by his image. To the public, he was Barney Fife, lighthearted, silly, and endlessly funny. But when the cameras stopped rolling, Don was a deeply reflective man who often wrestled with depression. He feared showing vulnerability, worried that if he ever admitted to the public how much he struggled inside, it would ruin the illusion that made him famous. He carried that weight quietly, masking his pain behind his iconic nervous smile. Part of the burden came from the nature of the entertainment industry itself. In Hollywood, where actors are often typecast, Don quickly realized that the role of Barney would define his career. Karen has explained that while her father was grateful for the part, it also haunted him. Casting directors and producers rarely saw beyond Barney Fife, limiting his opportunities and keeping him boxed into the image that had made him a star. Behind closed doors, Don often expressed frustration at being unable to prove that he was capable of more. The relentless schedule of television also drained him. Shooting day after day, constantly performing under pressure, and knowing millions of viewers were judging his every move took its toll. Don was meticulous, always rehearsing, always worrying about getting the timing exactly right. Karen remembers that even in their home life, her father couldn't switch off the anxiety that came with his work. He was, in her words, always performing in his head, never allowing himself the peace of simply being Don Knotts the man, rather than Don Knotts the entertainer. Karen's revelations about this period of her father's life are heartbreaking. She describes moments when she saw him retreat into himself, exhausted by the demands of fame. Despite the laughter he created on screen, she says he often seemed lonely, weighed down by the very success that had made him a household name. Don's friends and colleagues admired him for his comedic genius, but few were aware of the inner turmoil he battled every single day, and yet he carried on. He pushed himself to keep smiling, to keep joking, to keep being the funny man everyone expected. Karen notes that in many ways, her father sacrificed his own peace of mind to bring joy to others. It was as though he felt obligated to live up to the image the world had of him, no matter how much it cost him inside. This is the side of Don Knotts the public never saw, a man who bore the weight of his fame with quiet suffering, hiding his pain so others could laugh. The tragic irony is that while audiences saw him as carefree, his daughter knew that fame had become both his greatest gift and his deepest burden. In the next chapter, we'll explore how these pressures spilled over into Don's personal life, affecting his relationships, his health, and the way his family experienced the man behind the screen. While Don Knotts spent his public life making millions laugh, his private life was far more complicated. According to his daughter Karen, the very insecurities and anxieties that made him such a brilliant comedian also created turmoil at home. To the outside world, Don seemed endlessly charming, but those closest to him knew he was often consumed by doubts and struggles that went much deeper than his on-screen persona suggested. Karen has described her father as a man who longed for love and stability, but often found it difficult to hold on to them. Don married 3 times, and each relationship reflected the strain of a man trying to balance fame, personal demons, and the search for happiness. His first marriage, to Catherine Metz, gave him 2 children, including Karen. But the pressures of his rising career, the grueling schedule of the Andy Griffith Show, and his inner restlessness put a heavy strain on the marriage. The constant time away from home, combined with Don's emotional struggles, eventually led to its breakdown. Karen recalls that while her father loved his children deeply, he often found it difficult to be fully present. His nervous energy and constant self-criticism sometimes made it hard for him to connect in the way he wanted. She remembers moments of tenderness, her father playing silly games, cracking jokes at the dinner table, but also periods when he seemed distant, locked in his own worries. He was always thinking, always pacing, always second-guessing himself, she explained. Even when he was with us, part of him was somewhere else. As Don's career continued, so too did his struggles with relationships. His second marriage, Lorely Chukna, ended after nearly a decade, again strained by the same pattern. Don's insecurities and anxieties often made him hard to live with. He wanted love, but he was haunted by a fear of failure, even in his personal life. Karen admits, it was heartbreaking to watch her father go through cycles of hope and disappointment, always chasing the happiness that seemed to slip away from him. Yet despite these struggles, Don remained a devoted father in his own way. Karen has spoken movingly about the private conversations they shared, the times he opened up about his fears and his regrets. He didn't always know how to show it, she said, but he cared deeply about us. He wanted to be better, to do better, but he was fighting battles that nobody else could see. Don's health also became a growing concern as the years went on. He suffered from chronic hypochondria, anxiety about his health, that often left him convinced he was gravely ill even when doctors reassured him otherwise. This constant fear only deepened his sense of fragility. Karen remembers how exhausting it was to watch her father battle invisible enemies, worries, doubts, and fears that seemed to cling to him no matter how much success or love he found. One of the most poignant truths Karen has shared is that comedy was both her father's salvation and his curse. His ability to make others laugh gave him purpose and admiration, but it also became a mask he couldn't remove. At home, he sometimes felt pressure to be funny Don, even when he was exhausted or sad. The world expected a clown, but his family saw a man who was often carrying far too much inside. Still, Karen insists that her father's struggles did not erase his love or his goodness. She recalls moments when he showed vulnerability, confiding in her about his worries and asking for her understanding. These were the moments that revealed the real Don Knotts, the man behind the character, the father who wanted to be remembered not just for his laughter, but for his humanity. In many ways, Karen's decision to finally speak about her father's private struggles is a way of honoring him. By telling the truth, she shows that Don was more than a television legend. He was a man who faced real battles, sometimes won them, sometimes lost them, but never stopped trying. And as the years wore on, those battles would only intensify, leading to the final chapter of his life, a chapter that his daughter says was both heartbreaking and revealing about the true cost of being America's funny man. As Don Knotts grew older, the pressures of a lifetime in entertainment and the battles with his inner demons began to catch up with him. Though he remained active in television and film well into his later years, with memorable roles in shows like Three's Company and guest appearances that kept him in the spotlight, the man behind the screen was quietly wearing down. His daughter Karen, now 71, has revealed that her father's final years were a mixture of pride, pain, and a haunting sense of unfinished business. Don's health began to falter in the late 1990s and early 2000s. After decades of living with anxiety and hypochondria, his fears about illness became reality when he was diagnosed with lung cancer and other health complications. Despite his struggles, Don continued to work, almost as if comedy was the medicine that kept him alive. Friends and family recall that, even in moments of weakness, he would still crack a joke, still find a way to bring laughter to those around him. But privately, Karen says, his pain was evident. He was facing the inevitable, and the same insecurities that had plagued him his whole life resurfaced with greater force. Karen has described those final years as bittersweet. On one hand, her father's legacy was firmly established. He was celebrated as one of the greatest comedians in television history, admired by peers and loved by audiences across generations. On the other hand, Don struggled to accept that legacy for himself. He worried he hadn't done enough, hadn't been good enough, hadn't lived up to the expectations the world had placed on him. He was harder on himself than anyone else. Ever could be, Karen explained. Even when people praised him, he always wondered if he really deserved it. In his final days, Don's family and closest friends gathered around him, offering love and support. Karen has shared that being by his side gave her a deeper understanding of the man he truly was. Beneath the humor, beneath the insecurities, was a man who had given everything he had to his craft, even when it cost him dearly. He had lived with fear and doubt, but he had also given joy to millions, a gift few could ever match. When Don Knotts passed away in February 2006, the world mourned the loss of an icon. Tributes poured in, celebrating the actor who had made Mayberry unforgettable and had left behind a body of work that continues to inspire comedians and actors today. But for Karen, the loss was deeply personal. She lost not just a legend, but her father, the complicated, fragile, loving man who had shaped her life in ways few outsiders could understand. Now at 71, Karen has chosen to speak openly about the awful truth of her father's struggles. Not to tarnish his legacy, but to complete it. She wants the world to see Don Knotts as more than just Barney Fife or a funny man on screen. She wants people to know he was a human being, one who battled his demons, stumbled, got back up, and kept trying to live a life of meaning despite his fears. In sharing this, Karen reminds us that even those who seem to have it all, fame, success, adoration, may still fight battles we never see. Her words are a powerful reminder of the price of laughter. Comedy can heal, but it can also hide pain. Don Knotts gave the world joy, often at the expense of his own peace of mind. And yet, perhaps that is why his work continues to resonate. Because behind every nervous smile, every fumbled line, and every hilarious stumble was a man pouring his heart into his art, no matter the cost. As Karen puts it, her father's greatest gift wasn't just laughter, it was honesty. Even in his humor, he reflected the awkwardness, the fears, and the humanity that we all share. And in that sense, his legacy is not just one of comedy, but of courage. If Don Knotts' story moved you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Which of Don's performances touched your heart the most? And do you believe comedy often hides the deepest pain? Let us know below.